First, thank you all for coming to see the next President of the United States, Mitt Romney. Governor Romney has campaigned throughout Iowa. And every time he talks, he speaks of the Republican principles of a strong military, a strong economy, and strong families. Governor Romney has committed to the full Iowa process. He announced his campaign here. He participated in the straw poll in August, and he will make numerous visits to this state in preparation for the caucus. It's because of that commitment that I support Mitt Romney, and I would hope that you do too. He has the experience, the vision, and the values to make a great president. If you feel that way, and I hope that you do, please fill out this supporter card that you found on your chair when you came in. Now, I'd like for you to please give a warm welcome, a warm Cedar Valley welcome, to the next President of the United States, Mitt Romney.
Thank you. Cedar Valley welcome. Now that encompasses what communities? Cedar Falls, all over. See, I have to make sure I know where I am and get it right. We have a bit of a family tradition of messing up exactly where we are. My dad was governor of Michigan. I was born and raised in Michigan. My dad was governor of Michigan from 1962 till 1968. When he was just elected, he went to the 4th of July celebration in a place called Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And he got up to the stand and he said, "It's really terrific being here in Mount Clemens." And there's this big ooh, you know, from the audience. And my dad didn't catch that something was wrong. My mother leaned forward and said, "George, pleasant, it's pleasant." He said, "Yes, it's very pleasant here in Mount Clemens." So I have to be careful to make sure I know exactly where I am. Thank you so much for that introduction and for your generosity of coming here today. You are generous to spend the time to get to know people running for president. My guess is you wanted to have Iowa, the first in the nation. You are the first caucus, the first sweepstakes state in the presidential contest. But you didn't know that by becoming first, it meant you had to endure all these presidential candidates coming by. You had to go to Ames and vote. I see a yellow t-shirt there. Thank you for being in Ames. And exactly. And so it means you got to listen to a lot of politicians and sort through a lot of fact and fiction and decide who has the character that you think could lead the nation. And I appreciate the energy and the time you spend at that. Although it does remind me of another joke, and this one's not true. But it's funny, I think. It's about being careful what you wish for. It's about a young couple, 50 years old. Now you notice how your perspective on young changes as you get older. A young couple, 50 years old, is walking along the beach, and they stumble across the proverbial lamp in the sand, you know, and the genie pops out and says to each of them, "You each get one wish." And the wife says, "I'd like to see what it's like to be covered in jewels." And poof, diamonds and rubies, sapphires, quite happy. The genie turns to the husband and says, "And what do you want?" And he said, "I'd like to see what it's like to be married to somebody 30 years younger than me." And poof, he turns 80 years old. So you got to be careful what you wish for. Well, you wish to be first in the nation, and so you endure. This is my third visit to this area. And I've visited now, let's see, 62, 63 counties, some number like that in Iowa. My son Josh has been to all 99 counties in Iowa. He and his wife Jen and their 3 kids got a Winnebago and started going across the state and campaigning. It's a family affair for us. And we're in this because we care very deeply about the country and believe that America's future is even brighter than our past. But we also believe that we need to make critical decisions right now if our future is going to be bright. And that we face such extraordinary challenges right now that we could take a sharp left turn as a nation and follow in the pathway that Europe took, to big government and big taxes and big brother running our lives, and that would make us a weaker nation with a weaker future and a bleaker prospect for prosperity down the road. And so I see this as a critical time for the country, and I believe that somebody like myself, who spent his life in the private sector, working in business, small business, then becoming bigger business, I learned some lessons from that. And then I went out and became the person responsible for organizing the Olympic Games. And that voluntary experience added to the things I understood. And then I became the governor of Massachusetts and learned how to employ some of those private sector skills in the public sector. I see someone wearing a Boston shirt over here. She's a Boston Red Sox fan, I'm sure, and a New England Patriots fan. There may be a couple of those in the room. Thank you. And so I learned from those experiences and believe that that would enable me to help America make the right choices and actually do the right thing so that we can be strong enough to overcome the challenges we face. And I believe we face unusual challenges in this country today. I don't know whether you have that same perspective. I think there are a lot of Americans that just don't want to think about the problems and the challenges. And there are real challenges. Don't be frightened by them, because we'll rise to the occasion, as Americans always do. But there are real challenges. We're under attack as a nation and as a civilized world from radical, violent jihadists, fundamental Islamists who want to cause the collapse of modern civilizations throughout the world. And they want to particularly kill Americans and bring down our government. It's a very frightening and fantastically absurd approach and philosophy, but they are nonetheless committed to doing those things. They are crazy in my view, but not stupid. And they look at the world and they see how interconnected our economy is, and they think about the weapons that they're trying to obtain, and they think they can actually do what they have set out to do, which is to replace all modern governments and put a caliphate, a religious leader, an imam in charge of the world. It's a very frightening scenario. And then across the world we face a different kind of challenge. And you here in John Deere country, I imagine, recognize this as well as anyone, and that is we face new competition coming from Asia. We've been competing with Japan, yes, largely with Europe over the years, but increasingly now we're going to be competing with China and India, other parts of Asia, and they're tough. They're not easy competitors. And we're going to have to raise the bar here if we want to stay ahead and remain the world's economic power. Other challenges are more domestic grown. We spend too much money in America. Our federal government spends too much money. We use too much foreign oil. Our healthcare system leaves 47 million people without health insurance. Education. Our schools are falling behind international standards. I don't know how you lead the world forever if your schools are falling behind. Immigration. We don't enforce our borders. We don't stop illegal immigration. We've got challenges of a domestic nature. So given all of those things, from jihad in one part of the world to the emergence of Asia as a competitor, to the domestic problems we have, we got some challenges. And my friends on the Democratic side of the aisle have their view. Hillary Clinton stands up and says she'd bring change to America. I'm sure she would. Now, that's not the kind of change I want. Her big government, big taxes, big brother view is not what America needs. The Democrats are calling for defeat, if you will, against the jihadists. You hear someone like John Edwards say that there's no war on terror. It's just a Bush bumper sticker. Well, you tell that to the people in Malaysia and Tunisia, and tell that to the people in Indonesia, Nigeria, Algeria, Egypt, Pakistan, Israel, Lebanon. Tell it to people in England and Germany and Spain and the people of America. There's a war being waged by terrorists, and if I'm president, there'll be a war waged and won against the terrorists. Now, you have someone like Harry Reid say that we lost the war in Iraq. Can you imagine saying that while we have men and women in harm's way? And we did knock down Saddam Hussein and his military, and we are successful in our surge. The Sunnis are joining with us to help reject Al-Qaeda. Have we made mistakes in Iraq? Absolutely. And have we been perfectly managed? Certainly not. But the surge is working. It is resulting in less violence, and it's also resulting in the elimination of Al-Qaeda safe havens. We don't want to leave Iraq in a setting where Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah are able to recruit and train and launch attacks against us. and we're successful in that regard. And Harry Reid and the others are wrong when it comes to that statement. And by the way, another threat coming from the world of radical jihad is Iran. And their pursuit of nuclear weapons is perhaps the greatest threat to the stability of the world and to the safety of our world. And I watched the Democratic debate, or excerpts from it, and I listened to the Democratic candidates, all more concerned about the president, our president, protecting America than they were about Ahmadinejad having a nuclear bomb. They just seem to have an entirely delusional perspective as to the threat that we face from radical jihad. My answer is we need to strengthen our military. We need to have at least 100,000 additional troops, better equipment and armament for them. We need to make sure as well that they have the care they deserve when they come home. And so I want to see a stronger military, and I want to acknowledge the reality of the threat that we face. Now there's another challenge. I mentioned our economic challenge, the competition coming from Asia. Our Democratic friends there, I think in their heart of hearts, feel that we need to retreat from the competitive battlefield of the world. That somehow we need to protect America from foreign competition because it's just too tough. We just can't keep up. And I think the reason they feel that is that in the case of all three of the front runners in the Democratic field, no one of them has actually worked in a business that produced a good or a service that's sold around the world. They haven't competed around the world. They haven't been in the private sector in business. And therefore, when they see a problem, they imagine that the only answer is government. When I see a problem, I figure the problem is most likely government. So we have a different perspective. So I look at what's happening internationally as we compete, and I say, you know what? The right course is not for us to try and stop competing. It's to strengthen our ability to compete. And how do you do that? Well, you keep our taxes down. The Democrats want to raise taxes on Social Security, raise taxes on incomes, raise inheritance taxes, raise corporate taxes. That doesn't build a strong economy. The Democrats want as well to give all the people who come here illegally, they want to give all amnesty. That doesn't strengthen our economy. Legal immigration, that's good. I like it. I want it. Illegal immigration, that we got to stop. When we look at one of our great challenges is foreign oil. We're going to have to finally get ourselves off of our dependence on foreign oil. So we've got challenges to make sure that we remain highly competitive around the globe. Now I see in front of me here, I see this screen behind me and this projector in front of me. And oh, do I get that? Oh, you get it. Okay. Oh, wow. Look at that. And so you're going to have something which is actually, this is actually medicine here. This is known as the cure for insomnia. I'm going to show you a few things I'd like to talk to you about that relate to how we stay competitive globally. Of course, we keep our taxes down, get ourselves off of foreign oil, make sure that immigration works for us instead of working against us. But there's some other things I want to mention to you about making sure that we open markets to America's goods and services. And you want to care about that because you're in the home of John Deere and you're in the home of corn and soybeans. And I'll talk to you about how important foreign trade is, selling American products overseas is to people in Iowa overall. But I'd like to open markets to America and train our workers for the jobs of tomorrow. So I'm going to talk about four things that I think we need to do. One is make sure the president has the authority to negotiate ways to open up markets. Two is to train and assist and empower our own workers to be more successful globally. Three is to promote a level playing field among nations. And in some cases it's not. And four is to build what I'll call a Reagan zone of economic freedom. And that is, well, we'll talk about that in a moment, but it's a way to make sure that our goods and services are freely sold throughout the world. Let me start off with something I find interesting. That's a map of the world. It looks distorted. It is. Because the size of a country on this map is proportional to the number of people in that country. So you can see America looks relatively small there compared to the way we normally see it. And this over here, this is India, that sort of dark mustard colored, and that of course is China. And you see, of course, the large population of Africa and the rest of the world. What it tells you is, if America is going to remain the economic leader of the world, we're going to have to trade, do business, not just in the light purple color area, America. We're going to have to find ways to do business around the world. Because our services and our products need to be sold throughout the world for us to remain the economic powerhouse of the world. And by the way, the only way to remain the military powerhouse of the world is if you're also the economic powerhouse. You can't be a tier 1 military and a tier 2 economy. So I want to find ways to get us there. Now some people say, nope, let's put a wall around us. But protectionism hurts. It hurts incomes in this country. It hurts farmers because, you know, 1 out of 3 acres is planted for export. So you put protectionist walls around our country. That hurts farmers, and of course it would reduce our ability to lead and influence the world. Other nations recognize this. Other nations are working out agreements with one another to sell goods to each other on an advantage basis. And while we sit here with our hands in our pockets in Washington right now, other nations are zipping ahead, making sure they have agreements to trade with one another. Now there's a nice picture of each one of the Democratic leaders, all smiling and looking so nice. And you'd think I could have picked a less flattering picture of each of them, but I actually think they're pretty nice people. But without reading all of this, these guys, in every case, are trying to resist the idea of opening markets and competing around the world on a basis that makes it more and more probable that Americans will be able to sell goods and services around the world. They don't want the president to have that trade promotion authority. It's something I think is critical. And by the way, I mentioned that you want to make sure to open markets for our farmers. Iowa exported $8.4 billion worth of product last year. $8.4 billion to over 180 countries. And it's growing. Export values from Iowa grew 31% over a couple of years. 31%. 348,000 jobs in Iowa are supported by international trade. And by the way, I didn't just put this green and yellow combine here because I knew where I was today. That's been there for a few days. And there are over 2,500 companies in Iowa that export their products, including, of course, the John Deere family. I'm not going to read that. That shows all the places where Iowa goods and services go. Go to the next slide. This is sort of interesting. You know which, you can tell by looking at this, which state exports more agricultural products than any other in America? It's California. They're number 1 at 10.5 billion. Iowa number 2 at 4.2 billion. But California is a huge state with a huge population. So if you break it apart like I've done here, the amount of agricultural export per person from Iowa is $1,412 per person in the entire state, man, woman, and child, and only $287 per person in California. Exports make a big difference to the well-being of the people in Iowa, obviously. So we want to open markets. Now, how do we make sure that our workers have the skills of tomorrow? My view is that our current system of workforce training and workforce development really is failing a lot of individuals as they want to get the skills for the new jobs of tomorrow. And I think one of the reasons is because of our system has got overwhelming bureaucracy, excessive administrative overhead, and in some cases, duplicate programs. Program after program. I became governor, and I was looking for ways to cut back expenses and to balance my budget. And I saw that there were 13 workforce development programs in our state. And I said, why don't we get rid of all of them except one, just to have one good program? And they said, well, we can't. Because to get federal money, you have to have different agencies, 13 different ones managing this. Well, it's even worse at the federal government level. I want to find ways to simplify and improve our workforce training program. I want to streamline our training and education programs, beginning by auditing. I'm not talking about just a financial audit. I mean an assessment of what's going well and what's not, what programs work and which don't, all of the programs. And then number 2, have one-stop shops where people who've been displaced from industries that are in trouble, that they can go to one place and get the help they need. And number 2, you know, instead of sending money out to bureaucrats in Washington that could sit behind the desk and ask you what training you'd like, oh, you'd like to work as a beautician, well, we have 4 agencies you can go to get those dollars. Instead of doing that, I'd rather have a displaced worker have an account given to them, which they could use for their own education and training. And they can guide where they want to get that education, including at a community college. They could also take that account and say to an employer, if you hire me, you could use this account I have to train me. So an employer says, gosh, here's a person that got displaced from this industry. They have a $3,000, let's say, $3,000 training account to their name. If we hire them, we get $3,000 worth of funds to help train them. It gives an employer the incentive to hire someone who's been displaced. And of course, it gives an individual a better shot at getting a job. The third area, how do you promote a level playing field? Well, I want to, of course, push to conclude negotiations with the WTO and the Doha round in a way that benefits America. But I also want to make sure that we fight currency manipulation by countries like China and others. They peg their currency to the dollar in such a way that their products come at a deep discount. And therefore, on the world marketplace, their products look like they're less expensive. Whereas if they let their currency float, then the difference between our prices would be much more modest. You also have to protect something known as intellectual property rights. First time I heard that a few years ago, I didn't know what they meant, but they said this: look, when we develop software, or we developed a piece of hardware, or a movie, or we developed a design, or a patent of some kind, other countries can take those things, duplicate them, not pay us for them, send them out throughout their country, even throughout the world, and we don't get paid for the technology that we spent so dearly to develop. We got to protect the intellectual property rights of this nation. Now we also need to fight protectionist standards, product standards that come from other nations, where they put up standards that keep our products from coming in. And finally, of course, we've got to protect our consumers with stringent safety standards. We don't want our dogs getting killed by their dog food, or our kids getting poisoned by their lead paint. Now when I talk about protecting our intellectual property right, let me just note something. You probably know already, but this takes America, and it shows the percentage of our workforce all the way back to 1800. And I was not born then. That was 1800 to 2005. And it shows what proportion of our workforce is in different areas. Agriculture is the light blue. You'll see about 93, 94% of the workforce in 1800 was agriculture. And today it's more like 2 or 3% is agriculture. This maroon slice here, that's industry. And you'll see it was small, then it grew quite large, and now it's getting a lot smaller. And the yellow, of course, is services. Services, and that's everything from biotechnology to drug patents to software and design and so forth. Services are a huge portion of the American economy. And the agreements we worked out with other nations on trade over the last decades really were focused on products manufactured and some agriculture, but we really didn't think as much about service and protecting our intellectual property rights as we need to. And so I want to make sure that the new agreements we enter into contemplate growing agriculture, growing industry, but also protecting services. And services, of course, are a big part of the Iowa economy. This is the state of Iowa. And it shows the services employment having gone from 2003, 943,000 people, now to 2005, 967,000 people. Services represent 2/3 of the economy here in Iowa. And then a big healthy dose of manufacturing, and agriculture is the smaller piece here, which was a bit of a surprise, not by land area, but by dollars. Let's turn to the next. Now, in order for us to be competitive around the world, we've got to make sure that trade is fair. Ronald Reagan decided to open up trade that worked for America. He launched free trade agreements, that's FTAs, launching U.S. free trade agreements that now include 16 nations across the nation. We have agreements with nations so that we can trade freely with them, 16 of them. And that really spurred extraordinary prosperity for us as a nation. I believe that we need to, once again, take Ronald Reagan's vision and expand that. Of course, I want to keep the World Trade Organization efforts underway, but I want to go to something that's beyond just one-by-one individual nation agreements and the WTO, and that's by Ronald Reagan's zone. I'd like to create a global zone of economic freedom to create the largest free trade area ever for our goods and services, where there'd be very high standards to make sure that investment can flow from nation to nation, where intellectual property rights are protected, where the non-tariff barriers are taken down, and where services are recognized, and where currency can't be manipulated. And I'd like to mobilize nations that are committed to fair and open markets. I'd like to start with the people we already have, our 16, and get them to be part of this zone. I'd like to see it expanded to the European Union at some point, and every other nation that wants to live by those high standards. And ultimately, we can work together to help the WTO improve their capacity as well. These are the nations we currently have agreements with. I'd like to see us do a better job in bringing these nations together in this, I'll call it the Ronald Reagan zone of trade. Well, that's about as much as you're going to have to endure of those. There you go. He's going to stop that. And so that gives you a sense of something I think is important. And if you didn't follow it entirely, that's probably not critical. What is critical is that you understand that I believe that America can compete. and that I believe that we can win across the world as long as we're training our workers effectively, and that number two, we're opening markets up around the world in a way that protects us, not just them, and that trade is fair and balanced, and that it's good for America. And I believe if we do that, you'll see agricultural products continue to grow, and you'll see those that serve the world in manufacturing and other products continue to grow, and that America can remain the world's strongest nation. Now, I started off by saying I want to strengthen America. I want to strengthen our military with more troops. I want to strengthen our economy with low taxes, getting us off of foreign oil, trade that works for us, ending illegal immigration, and one more I'll mention. I want to strengthen families. I don't think there's any work going on in America today that's more important than the work that goes on within the four walls of the American home. And if you want to see a strong America down the road, you got to see strong families. And the family structure is without question being challenged in America today. I believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. I believe the child deserves the benefit of having both genders in their development. I also believe that we ought to teach our kids that before they have babies, they get married. That marriage comes first. I want you to know that I'm confident about our future. I'm optimistic. Because I recognize that despite all the chatter and all the to and fro that goes on in a presidential campaign, I believe America is going to choose strength. I believe we're going to look back to the same challenges we faced during Ronald Reagan's days, and Ronald Reagan didn't shrink from the world. He didn't say, oh, we can't compete, let's put up walls. He said, no, we're going to compete with the world. He didn't say to the Soviet Union, we can't compete militarily. He said, no, we're going to outdo them militarily. Ronald Reagan's strategy was to strengthen America, and by strengthening America, he overcame the challenges of the last century. Now we have different challenges this century, and I believe the answer is as it was before. Strengthen America. In our families, in our homes, in our workplaces, so we have great jobs, and in our defense, so we can be safe and protected. My campaign is about strengthening America. And I believe people across Iowa are welcoming this campaign because they say that's the right way to go. The heart of the American people is sound and strong. First time I came here, I was asked, do you have heartland values? Absolutely. Then I went down south. Do you have southern values? Oh, I got those too. And in Michigan, do you have Midwestern values? That's where I was born and raised. You bet I do. And New Hampshire, do you have Yankee values? Oh, yeah. You see, as I go across the country, they're known by different names. But we love our families, we love our God, we love our country. We'll sacrifice for each of them. Americans love opportunity, and we believe in being a strong country and leading the world. I'm convinced we will. We always have been. We're the hope of the world. Come join my effort. Fill out that card. Come vote at the caucus a few times. No, just once. Bring a friend with you. They'll vote a few times. Bring a friend with you. And let's make sure that we send a message loud and clear from Iowa that we're in favor of a campaign of strength and making sure that America remains the hope of the world. Thank you so much. Good to be with you today. Turn to you for questions that you may have. I won't keep you a long, long time. Yes, sir. Question is leadership in government finances. One, those Yankee values are a lot like Heartland values. They tell you that you don't spend more money than you take in. You don't keep on adding and adding and adding to debt and obligations of the country. And so I want to see us finally have a balanced budget. And as part of that, I don't want to raise taxes because raising taxes hurts working families, kills jobs, and weakens our country. Instead, I want to rein in spending. And so I've said if I'm elected president, I will pledge that we'll cap discretionary non-military spending at inflation less 1%. And if I get appropriations above that amount, I will veto them. And I like vetoing. I'm comfortable with vetoing. I did it 844 times as the governor of Massachusetts. I had some fun things I got to veto. They came to me with a bill to build gazebos at the state expense. I vetoed that. There was a bill that came to say we're going to stop charter schools, constructing new charter schools. I like school choice. I vetoed that. There was a bill that said that that illegal aliens that come to this country should get a tuition break in our state university and state colleges. I vetoed that. So I like vetoes. Spending. Yes, sir.
Our sovereignty is being threatened on a number of fronts. Well, what do you think the chances of getting the United States out of the UN? Can we withdraw from the UN?
We could. Let me tell you, the UN has failed us in a lot of ways. It's failed to prevent genocide, as is going on in the Sudan. It's failed to prevent war, rather. It has failed in a number of ways. I would not withdraw from the UN, but there are some things I would withdraw from. There is a Human Rights Council on the United Nations, and it's comprised of nations which offer various condemnations, sanctions, if you will, to certain nations. They've condemned Israel 9 times, but they've never seen it in their interest to ever consider the Sudan or Zimbabwe or Cuba. And it's, in my opinion, it's a laughable organization, and I would withdraw all of our support, financial and otherwise, from the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. I'd also make sure that people recognize that we can't rely on the United Nations to get the job done. And so I'd like us to form alliances and groupings of free nations so that free nations can come together and protect our interests, help defeat the global jihad, because ultimately we're going to have to help moderate Muslims reject the extreme. And we just can't wait for the United Nations. Now, why stay in the United Nations at all? Well, I think it's a good idea to have a place where the world can come to talk. I also think that there are some agencies that have been helpful. The IAEA, the Atomic Inspection Agency, is able to make an assessment of which nations are living up to the nuclear non-proliferation treaties and which are not. That, I think, is useful. So I wouldn't exit the United Nations, but I let them know we're not happy, and I begin recognizing that we can't wait for the UN. And I was pleased to see the President as we dealt with Iran. He looked at Ahmadinejad. Here's a guy who, instead of being invited to the UN, should have been indicted. Indicted for genocide or incitation of genocide under the Genocide Convention. And the President said, I'm going to stop waiting for the UN to take sanctions against a nation that's creating a nuclear weapon. I'm instead going to take sanctions on our own, make sanctions on our own. That was the right thing to do. And there'll be other nations, I think, that'll join with us. And I want to see us combine with other nations to execute sanctions against nations that are committing genocide or violating the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in a way that would jeopardize the survival of another nation, including our own health and well-being. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think we have enough statesmen left?
You want to say it again for people to hear you? Go ahead.
Do you think we have enough statesmen left in Washington to get these programs taken care of?
That's a good question. I haven't been there yet. You know, I had a conversation with a man named Ezra Zilka. He's an immigrant to this country. He came here in the 1950s. He's Jewish. He was born in Baghdad. And he came here in the 1950s. He said, you know what concerns me about America today is that politics has become a profession, not a duty. And this is not my profession. I haven't run for president before. I served 4 years as a governor, learned a lot by doing that. But my career was, 1, being a dad and a husband, and 2, being a business person, and building a business and making it successful and learning from it. By the way, I wasn't always successful. I had some failures and some successes both. I learned from my failures as well as from the successes. But the idea of the founders was that people would go to Washington from normal walks of life, make a contribution, then go home. But they go now, and they don't ever go home. And now I am convinced that there are people of goodwill on both sides of the aisle. That there are Republicans and Democrats who love America and will put the country first. I really do believe that. I think there's some people who are so driven by power that it's like, you know, putting blinders on. They don't want to think about all the implications of what they're doing. And there are a lot of those. I don't know how many there are in each camp. But I hope that by going to Washington and not attacking personally the opposition, being willing to share credit, looking for common ground, calling for the best of people, that we're going to be able to deal with some of the challenges we face. And part of my confidence of that is that comes from, well, a little allegory my wife says. She says, watching Washington these days is like watching a couple of guys in a canoe on a fast-moving river headed for a waterfall. And she said, instead of paddling, they're arguing. And I think that's a bit of what's going on as the waterfall gets close. And I think the waterfall is close on global jihad, on competing with Asia, on our failure of our schools, failure of people to be able to have health insurance, overspending, overtaxing. I think as we get close enough to that waterfall, people say, you know what, it's time to start paddling. And I intend to be the leader that shouts that out. And if I still have a voice left, and make sure that Republicans and Democrats work together to get the job done. I believe I can do it. That's why I'm running. Look, I'm not looking for the next, notch. Excuse me, losing voice. The next notch in my career ladder, I don't have a political career. My life was in the private sector. I want to get America right, and I think I can do it. Thank you. Right here. Yes, sir. The light, the gray hair, sorry.
One of the big issues in the campaign is health care.
Yeah.
Would you like to share your plan, please?
Yeah, thank you. You know, it used to be that Republicans, when they heard the idea of everybody getting health insurance, they said, oh boy, that's a Democrat idea, we don't like it. And I know, I'm a Republican, and I know that when I talk about getting everybody insured, I lose a lot of people in the audience because they say, oh, that's what Democrats talk about. You must not be a real Republican. But I want to tell you something. Health care is not a Democrat issue. And I believe very strongly that it's a good thing for America to get everybody insured. Not to have the government give the insurance. That's not the right way. But to have the private market, the free market, as a place to get people insured. So we have our approach to do a good thing, which is getting people insured, which is the private markets, the free market, and they have their approach, which is having government take it over. So my idea in my state was to work with Democrats and see if we could find a way to get everybody insured. And I'll tell you, we spent about 2 years not figuring out how to do it. I just couldn't see how we could do it. And then it sort of hit us one day. We said, you know what? Everybody has health care in our state. They just don't have health insurance. It's like, well, what do I mean by that? Well, if in my state, and it's true here too, if someone has a heart attack and they don't have insurance, you don't say, well, just die in your apartment. Sorry, you haven't got insurance. No, the EMS vehicle comes and picks you up, takes you to the hospital, they do the surgery, they give you the drugs, you get treated, you go home, you get doctor visits. Who's paying for that? You are. If they don't have insurance, taxpayers are paying for it, or ratepayers that are buying insurance. So what I realized was everybody's getting health care, just some people aren't paying for it. It's like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I thought, wouldn't it make more sense to take the money we're using to give out free care and help people who actually need the help buy insurance? Not government insurance. Don't give them government insurance. Help them buy free market insurance. And so we went out there to find out who was uninsured. We had about 500,000 people in our state without insurance. We found out about half of them were making $54,000 a year and more. A quarter of them were making $75,000 a year and more. We said, why don't you have health insurance? They said, why should I have health insurance? If I get sick, I get free care at the hospital. We said, no more of that. No more free riders. We're going to get the cost of insurance down to make it more affordable. We deregulated much of our health insurance market. We got our premiums cut almost in half, and then let people get that insurance. Insisted they get it. Either get that insurance, I said, or pay your own way. But no more free ride if you got the money to buy insurance. And then number two, yeah. For the poor, let's say somebody making $18,000 a year, how are they going to get health insurance? We said, look, we're looking at the table here. Here's how much you have to pay a week. Let's say $5 a week. We'll pick up the rest of your premium. And as you get higher income, you'll pick up more and more. You'll own that policy. It's your private policy. And we found it cost us no more money to help people buy insurance than it had been costing us to give out free care at the hospital. So it didn't require more money. It didn't require a government takeover. It didn't require government insurance. Instead, private, market-based insurance. That was my approach. And I believe anytime there's a problem, whether it's the environment, schools, health care, we conservatives have an answer. And it's an answer that works. And I'm proud of what we did there, and I'd like to see other states do the same thing. I wouldn't mandate that every state do the same thing we did. I'd let states create their own plans. But I do have as an objective the idea that everybody gets health insurance. Thank you very much. I'm going to take one more question from this young lady in the front row. Yes?
You said that you're going to strengthen the military, and our enlistment is as low as it's been. What you going to do?
Let me tell you what I do. Are you available for military service?
But I don't think you'd want me.
I'm afraid they'd say the same thing to me, by the way. At my age, they don't want me. Let me tell you what I did in our state that made a big difference in military enlistments. I was seeing the National Guard enrollment go down by about 6% a year for my first years in the governor's chair. And I got together with the legislature, and we came up with a bill we called the Welcome Home Bill that said if you sign up for the National Guard, you get 4 years of college tuition and fees for free, all right? You get a full college education if you sign up for the National Guard. And our enrollments went up 30%. And so we just have to make sure that the offer that we make to people who are thinking of the military is competitive with their other offers. And if it is, we'll get people to join. And if it's not competitive enough, we have to make it better. But my view is, don't reinstate the draft. We have 1.5 members of the military now. I want to bring it up to 1.6 million. That does not require a draft. That requires us making sure that we provide a fair deal for people who sign up. And number two, they know that if they need care afterwards, they're going to get the care they deserve. And so I'm convinced we can strengthen our military that way. And let me tell you one last experience, and I love telling this story, because it underscored, in my view, the importance of America being strong. And that is this: the former Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, he's now the President of Israel, happened to be in Boston, meeting with the Consul General there, and he went to an apartment and was asked by one of the people in the apartment. I was sitting there listening. He said to Mr. Peres, he said, what do you think about the conflict in Iraq? And Shimon Peres said, well, before I answer that, I have to put it in context. He said, in the history of the world, America is unique. He said, in the history of the world, whenever there's been war, the nation that wins takes land from the nation that loses, because land is the source of value on the planet. One nation in history, during this last century, laid down hundreds of thousands of lives and took no land. No land from Germany, no land from Japan, no land from Korea. America. America is unique in the sacrifice it has made and will make for freedom, for ourselves and for freedom-loving people around the world. This is a unique nation. It is essential that this nation remain strong. Colin Powell said the only land we took after that last great conflict was enough land to bury our dead. It is essential that this nation have strong families, teaching our kids values of enduring nature. It's essential that we have a strong economy to provide good jobs for our kids and good jobs for us, and to make sure that we have the resources to build a strong military and protect ourselves in this land despite the evil that exists throughout the world. American strength is what my campaign is about. I think it's going to come down to that. People are going to ask, what's the campaign going to be about? What is the issue in 2008? The issue is, do you believe in strengthening America, or do you believe we should be a weaker nation? And I stand up for strength, and I need your help. Fill out that card. Come with us to the caucus. Send a loud message to the people across the country that you're in favor of a person who's not a lifelong politician, but who stands up for America's strength. Thank you so much.